If you have $50,000 sitting in your checking account because someone told you that's the smart way to build an emergency fund, you could be making one of the most expensive financial mistakes that nobody warns you about. Every single year, inflation quietly takes a bite out of that money, like termites chewing through the foundation of a house. You don't notice it day to day, but one morning you look up and realize the structure isn't nearly as strong as you thought. Hey, I'm Brian, and I spend way too much time thinking about how ordinary people accidentally lose thousands of dollars simply because they follow outdated financial advice. Here's the uncomfortable truth. An emergency fund is supposed to protect your future, not slowly erase it. Yet millions of people proudly keep huge piles of cash sitting in accounts that earn almost nothing, while inflation steadily chips away at their buying power. The cruel part? It feels responsible. It feels safe. It even feels financially disciplined. But what if the very thing giving you peace of mind is quietly costing you over $10,000 over the next decade? Today, I'm going to show you why the traditional emergency fund setup no longer makes sense, the simple framework that actually works today, and how one small change can keep your money working instead of slowly melting away. And if you're serious about making smarter decisions with your money instead of simply following old advice, consider subscribing because we break down complicated financial topics into practical strategies you can actually use. Now, before anyone starts typing angry comments, let me be very clear. I'm not saying emergency funds are a bad idea. They're one of the most important financial tools you can build. What I'm saying is that the way most people build them belongs in a different economic era. Think about why you keep a large emergency fund in your checking account. It isn't because you've run complicated calculations. It isn't because you've compared different account types. It's because seeing a large balance makes you feel safe. And that's completely understandable. Your brain loves certainty. It treats cash almost like a security blanket. Every extra dollar sitting there whispers, "You'll be okay." Behavioral economists call part of this loss aversion. Losing money hurts roughly twice as much as gaining the same amount feels good. So naturally, your brain says, "Don't touch the cash. Leave it exactly where it is." Then another bias sneaks in. It's called status quo bias, which simply means we prefer leaving things exactly as they are, because changing them feels risky, even when staying put quietly costs us money. Imagine owning a beautiful block of ice. Every day it looks almost identical. Maybe one tiny drop melts away. Nothing dramatic, nothing alarming, so you convince yourself nothing is changing. But come back a year later, and suddenly that block has shrunk far more than you expected. That's exactly how inflation works. Your account balance still says $50,000. The number hasn't changed, your banking app hasn't sent you a warning, but the purchasing power behind that number has quietly started disappearing. This is something economists call the money illusion. We focus on the number we see instead of what that number can actually buy. That's why so many intelligent, hardworking people believe they're protecting themselves when, in reality, they're allowing inflation to slowly snip tiny corners off every single bill they own. You don't feel the cuts because they happen so gradually, but they absolutely add up. And once you actually run the numbers, it's hard to look at a traditional emergency fund the same way again. If you're new here and just subscribed, comment your name below. I read every comment and shout out new subscribers in my next video. I do appreciate you joining me on this finance journey. Quick favor before we dive into the numbers. If you want to stop making expensive money mistakes that look responsible on the surface, hit subscribe. It's probably the best return on investment you'll ever get for exactly $0. Now let's do the math that almost nobody does. Imagine you keep $50,000 sitting in a standard checking account. The average checking account today pays roughly 0.07% interest. That sounds small because it is. On $50,000, that's only about $35 in interest over an entire year. $35. That's barely enough for dinner in many cities. Meanwhile, inflation keeps working 24 hours a day. Let's use a fairly normal inflation rate of 3%. At first glance, your account still says $50,000 after 10 years. Nothing looks wrong, but purchasing power tells a completely different story. That same $50,000 now buys only what roughly $37,000 would buy today. You didn't lose $13,000 because the bank took it. You lost it because time quietly collected the bill. It's like parking a brand new car outside and watching rust slowly spread underneath the paint. From a distance, everything still looks shiny. Underneath, the damage keeps growing. Now let's make the scenario even less comfortable. Suppose inflation averages 5% instead. Now that same $50,000 has purchasing power closer to $30,000 after 10 years. That's roughly a 40% reduction in what your money can actually do for you. Think about that. You worked for every one of those dollars. You traded hours of your life for them. Yet inflation quietly walked away with the equivalent of nearly $20,000 in buying power, simply because your money spent a decade standing perfectly still. Now compare that with someone who keeps only the cash they truly need available immediately, while placing the rest in accounts that actually earn meaningful interest or investments designed for long-term growth. One person's money behaves like a parked bicycle, slowly collecting rust. The other person's money behaves like a bicycle with someone actively pedaling it uphill toward financial independence. Neither person took reckless risks. Neither person eliminated their emergency fund. One simply stopped confusing accessibility with efficiency. And that's the difference that compounds year after year. So if the numbers seem so obvious, why do smart people keep making this mistake? Because money isn't just math. It's emotion wearing a calculator. One of the biggest psychological traps here is something called mental accounting. Your brain creates imaginary boxes. This box is for emergencies. That box is for investing. Another box is for vacations. Once money enters the emergency box, your brain puts a giant do not touch sign on it. It stops asking whether that money is working efficiently. It only asks whether it's still there. Then inertia takes over. Months become years. Years become decades. You log into your bank account, see $50,000, smile for a second, and move on with your day. Meanwhile, inflation quietly keeps dragging your financial boat backward like an enormous anchor tied beneath the surface. Here's what's fascinating. Most people think investing too much money is risky. Very few people stop to consider that holding too much cash can also be risky. It's just a quieter kind of risk. You don't see flashing red warning lights. You don't get scary headlines. Instead, your purchasing power slowly leaks away, like air escaping from a tire. Not enough to notice during one drive, but enough that eventually you're wondering why the ride has become so much harder. An emergency fund should absolutely give you confidence. But confidence doesn't come from keeping every available dollar frozen in one place forever. Confidence comes from building a system where every dollar has a clear job. Some dollars need to stay instantly available. Some dollars need to earn competitive interest. And some dollars should spend years growing into something much bigger. That's the difference between simply saving money and actually managing it. And that's where the modern emergency fund strategy completely changes the game. So let me show you the system I would use if I were starting from scratch today. I call it the 3-tier emergency protocol. The goal isn't to eliminate your emergency fund. The goal is to make every dollar do the job it's actually qualified to do. Let's start with Tier 1. This is your immediate response cash. Think of it as the fire extinguisher hanging on the wall. You hope you never need it, but when you do, you don't want to spend 5 minutes looking for it. Tier 1 stays in your checking account. But here's the difference. Instead of parking 6 months or even a year's worth of expenses there, you keep 1 month of your essential expenses, plus about $1,000 as a buffer for life's little surprises. Notice I said essential expenses, not your current lifestyle, not every subscription, not restaurant dinners, not weekend shopping. I'm talking about your survival number, your rent or mortgage, utilities, groceries, insurance, minimum debt payments, the bills that keep the lights on and a roof over your head. Let's say those essentials total $3,000 per month. Under this system, Tier 1 holds roughly $4,000. That's enough to cover an unexpected car repair, a broken appliance, a temporary delay in your paycheck, or almost any financial inconvenience that pops up without warning. Here's why this matters. Most emergencies don't demand $50,000 by tomorrow morning. They usually demand a few $100s, maybe a couple thousand. Keeping an extra $46,000 sitting idle just in case is like wearing a full winter coat inside your house, because someday it might snow. You're solving tomorrow's problem by making today less efficient. Tier 1 gives you speed. But speed isn't the only thing an emergency fund needs. It also needs productivity. That's where Tier 2 comes in. Tier 2 is where your real emergency fund lives. This money belongs in a high-yield savings account, not a traditional checking account earning almost nothing. Its job is simple. Protect your purchasing power while remaining easy to access if life throws something much bigger your way. Going back to our example, if your survival number is $3,000 per month, then 3 to 5 months of expenses equals somewhere between $9,000 and $15,000. That money still stays safe. It still stays liquid. But instead of earning almost 0.07%, it might earn somewhere around 4 to 5%, depending on market conditions. Now your emergency fund isn't sitting on the sidelines doing absolutely nothing. It's at least pulling its own weight. It's like replacing an employee who sleeps through every shift with one who quietly works in the background every single day. Then comes Tier 3. This is where so many people accidentally hold themselves back. Anything above your genuine emergency needs should have a different assignment. It should be invested for long-term growth. Imagine you currently keep $50,000 in cash. Using our example, maybe $4,000 stays in checking. Another $12,000 moves into a high-yield savings account. That still leaves roughly $34,000 available for long-term investing. Left invested for years, that money has the opportunity to compound instead of simply waiting. That's the real mindset shift. Your emergency fund should look like a life raft. Light, reliable, always ready when you need it. But if your emergency fund has quietly grown into $50,000 of idle cash sitting in a checking account, it isn't a life raft anymore. It's an anchor dragging behind your financial boat every single day you leave it there. Now I already know what some of you are thinking. But Brian, what if something catastrophic happens? That's a fair question, because this isn't really about math anymore. It's about fear. Fear tells you that seeing a giant checking account balance equals security. But leadership means making decisions based on systems, not emotions. Imagine you're the chief executive officer of your own financial life. Would you allow half your company's resources to sit in a warehouse collecting dust simply because moving them feels uncomfortable? Of course not. You'd assign every dollar a purpose. That's exactly what you're doing here. Cash has an important job. So does savings. So do investments. Confusing those jobs doesn't create more safety. It creates more inefficiency. Remember, your emergency fund exists to help you survive temporary problems. It was never designed to become a permanent museum where your money sits behind glass for the next 20 years. Here's the irony. People often believe investing the extra money feels dangerous. Meanwhile, they completely ignore the guaranteed danger of inflation. One risk is visible, the other is silent. And silent risks often become the most expensive because nobody feels urgency to fix them. Being the CEO of your money means asking a different question. Not, where does this money make me feel safest? Instead ask, where does each dollar create the most value while still protecting me? That's a completely different mindset. And once you start thinking that way, every financial decision becomes clearer. Your checking account stops becoming a storage unit. It becomes mission control. Picture yourself 10 years from today. In one version of the story, your checking account still proudly shows a large balance. But inflation quietly shaved away thousands of dollars in purchasing power. Your money spent a decade standing perfectly still while the world kept moving. In the other version, you built a smarter system. You kept enough cash to sleep well at night. Your high-yield savings account helped protect your emergency fund. Your investments quietly compounded in the background year after year. Now your future self doesn't just feel secure. They have more options, more flexibility, more freedom. The difference wasn't that you earned dramatically more money. The difference was that you finally stopped asking your emergency fund to do a job it was never designed to do. Remember how I said at the beginning that an emergency fund should protect your future, not slowly erase it? That's exactly what this system does. It turns your money from a melting block of ice into a team of workers, each doing a specific job to build the life you actually want. Now I'm curious. How many months of emergency savings are you currently keeping? And after watching this, do you think it's actually the right amount? Let me know down in the comments, because I genuinely love to see where everyone stands. If you found this helpful, hit the like button so the algorithm knows we care about financial literacy instead of financial hype. Subscribe if you want more practical money strategies that actually help you build wealth over time. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. I'm Brian.